This is chapter 24 of The Wrong 10 Seconds, and it's one of my favourites as important things come to light. It probably comes as no surprise. We'll be counting on Phoebe for that. We go to her as she's just met Lydia, knowing about the affair with Paul, but not about Lydia's relationship to Charlie. Chapter 24, Phoebe, Thursday night and Friday. Sometimes when Phoebe found a picture she really liked, she would sketch it several times over. She'd fill in each drawing differently, bringing out a different shade. She'd spent today doing the same sort of thing with the gang video, watching it for the scary bits, a few more times for the angry bits, and again for the brave ones. It stopped feeling real and started feeling like art, as if she'd worked some kind of magic on it. With so many emotions appearing in a couple of minutes, how could anyone ever be called normal? She wanted to be the black woman in the video, tall and clever enough to laugh at bullies. But Phoebe wasn't, not even close. So she got lonely again, especially since she still wasn't speaking to any of her family. And she wandered out and, weirdly, found someone who didn't hate her, yet. Down the street, a baby cried. Someone shouted. A door slammed. Phoebe studied the woman's hand on the rim of the spinning saucer. It looked soft, not like a talon at all. Her nails were short and unpainted. You could even see her cuticles. "Are you sad?" Phoebe asked her. She wasn't afraid this time because she could already see the answer. The lady laughed a little, humming in through her nose, but replied, "Yeah." "What are you going to do?" "I guess I'll keep working and find new explanations and maybe make art. I'm Lydia, by the way." "I'm Phoebe." It sounded strange. Her name didn't get used much because she usually had to answer to Ginge. Her dad called her Love, but he kind of did that with everybody. "Do you like art, then?" "I like scribbling, but it's usually silly things." Lydia's voice was low and lonely, not loud friendly like the teachers at school Phoebe couldn't trust. This was an alliance of the desperate, not a friendship. "And what sort of art have you found, Phoebe?" Well, I take photos and then I draw them." Phoebe flashed a sample quickly at her, in case the incriminating evidence of what she'd done to her new ally, the picture she'd taken in this very park, burst through. Phoebe's latest photo showed the sun setting behind a billboard directing people to the shopping centre on the other side of town. "Add some sparkle," the sign said, as the sun's final brightness winked off the undersides of glowering clouds. "I like it," Lydia commented. "It's pretty and clever too. How old are you?" "Almost 15. "Is it a bit crap or was that just me?" Laughter bubbled in Phoebe. She quickly covered her mouth while answering, "Everyone says it's supposed to be easy, but it's crap, yeah." A group of kids from the year above Phoebe walked past in a cloud of lynx. The girls wore tiny skirts which they had to keep tugging to stop them riding up. No way had this lot, giggling on their way to a party, found adolescence to be crap. But Phoebe now knew one other person had done. "So," asked Lydia, "have you uncovered any explanations on your travels?" I haven't worked much out off the top of my head. People are rubbish. I can't find any way around it." Lydia tapped her foot slowly on the long dried mud. Her sandals imprinted the dirt with daisy shapes, their outline faint in the gathering dark. Phoebe might come back in the morning and take a picture of it. "I suppose," Lydia said, "people are what they feel, and maybe they act rubbish because they feel rubbish, and so goes the cycle." "You don't really think most people feel as rubbish as we do?" Like Shiana, who felt so unrubbish she didn't even notice her parents were fed up with each other. "I must admit, it's been a particularly appalling summer for me," answered Lydia. "Things don't really get better then, from school till when you're grown up?" "Oh, they do." Lydia spoke hastily, doing the usual adult thing of giving a convenient answer without considering its truth. But then she cracked her knuckles and noted, "I mean, when you move on from school, you can spend more time doing what you're passionate about. You find friends outside the petty circles of secondary school, and you build your own space and schedule. To an extent, at least. And those things help you get through whatever life continues to fling your way." "I guess that sounds better." "Sure. Even before you leave school, you can specialize a bit, can't you? And do art there or whatever. Wait, if you're only 14, didn't I see you at the college?" "Oh, yeah. I was looking for someone who teaches there, but I didn't see her. She probably doesn't want to see me now anyway." The streetlight nearest them fizzed on with an evil-looking red glow. Lydia murmured, "Never mind. The person I used to visit there doesn't want to see me either." "Maybe he wants to, but he can't right now." Phoebe dug her heels into the ground. A chorus of happy birthday drifted down the street from someone's back garden. Lydia looked up. "How do you... Oh, yes, you saw us. Were we magnificent or what?" "You looked very happy." They looked for all the world like Mr. Harrow would choose this woman rather than his wife. Lydia sighed. "But it's over. I did something unforgivable. Well, my dad did." "Your dad?" "He's gone off the rails a bit." Lydia stood up. "I need to go home. My cat might start worrying about me. At least that's what I like to tell myself." She laughed. "Won't anyone be missing you?" Phoebe lurched herself around in the disc. "My parents might. They mostly put up with me. But they don't get the point of art, and I'm not sure I do anymore either." It's to deal with reality, isn't it? Whether you need to escape it, enhance it, draw attention to it, whatever gets you through, Phoebe. See you around again, I'm sure. Lydia's eyes were warm brown in the streetlight, her skin creamy pale, so different from Mrs. Harrow. Whatever gets you through. It could be Phoebe's new motto. One of her videos got a man fired, another one showed an attack she hadn't stopped, and the photo of Lydia and Mr. Harrow. But creating them got her through. She'd stopped Shiana bullying her so badly. She hadn't gone mad, screaming in fright at those scary racist men. And it wasn't even Phoebe's fault Lydia lost her boyfriend. Lydia admitted it was her weird dad's. Phoebe slept well that night in her hot little box room. She woke to her phone bleeping. She was breathing through her hair, stuck over her lips in the sweltering heat. Megan had texted her, "Are you going to Shiana's today? She says the detective is coming. What should I wear?" Wear something that won't get soaked with sweat too fast, Phoebe thought. Seriously, who cared about clothes at a time like this? What idiots. She would never go back to Shiana's, ever. Phoebe flipped her pillow over and failed to find a cool patch. No one had told her about the inspector returning. She winced, remembering how disgusting Shiana had been around him. But he'd almost seen through her, although he probably believed the bit about Phoebe being special needs. She had to go. No way round it. Phoebe tore herself up from her tangled damp sheets and ran to the shower, leaving Kaylee wailing in the corridor about how now she'd never have time to do her hair properly. After a shower as cold as she could stand, Phoebe threw on jeans, a strappy top, and of course her hoodie, and ran out the door to be assaulted by humidity. The sky was grey. Clouds pressed the city like an iron, steaming everything dull and flat. The forecasters had been wrong, not a whisper of rain yet. Phoebe leapt over fresh vomit on the corner of the spine road connecting the estates, and ran to Shiana's, clutching her hoodie strings. The police car was parked outside the house. Phoebe burst through the door without knocking, thank God for the cool inside, but was it from the expensive air conditioning or from the icy stare Shiana directed at her? They were all gathered at the dining room table, Shiana sitting at one end, with Megan standing by her in a ridiculous checked mini dress as if this were a party. Shiana's mum was at the other end, pacing, ready to spring, and Mr. Harrow sat on one side of the table, his head leaning on his hands. He looked angry. The policeman sat with his back to Phoebe, facing the others, but he turned as she came in. The dog was nowhere in sight. "What the... Well, make yourself at home, I suppose, Phoebe," said Mrs. Harrow with a dry, shriveled laugh. Thanks." Phoebe couldn't move any closer. Why had she decided to do this? "Good. Miss Taylor." The policeman stood up, leaving a still steaming cup of tea at his place. "Please have a seat." Did his eyes linger on her hair? Phoebe tightened her hoodie strings. They slipped in her sweaty grasp. OMG, OMG, kept scrawling through her panicked brain in fat, bright, dripping letters like spray paint. Then she remembered Megan chanting it as Shiana made Phoebe pretend to eat dog poo. Right, Phoebe had to stay. The wood of the chair was cool as she sat, and she gripped the seat frame hard. With a twitch of her head, Mrs. Harrow returned to what they must have been talking about before. "Yes, we want to press charges. You've seen what happened in the video and how it upset Shiana." "My dad says even if that bloke didn't take the dog, you could charge him with criminal mischief," Megan volunteered hopefully. Her dad was an estate agent. Maybe he'd know. "I think we have to," sniffled Shiana. "It's only fair." The policeman's voice rumbled gently behind Phoebe. So that's where you are right now. Thank you. He saved her the awkwardness of twisting round toward him, striding into view at her right near the other two girls. I've checked in with Mr. Swenson, too, as part of the investigation. Mrs. Harrow's cheeks shrank even thinner. He's very upset about the impact of his actions, of course, Riddle continued, and he also informed me, when pressed, he felt he was doing the dog a favour at the time. You see, he'd heard the girls talk about pulling some rather nasty pranks on, he presumed, the puppy. They spoke about someone called Ginger. Phoebe froze, a flaming, red-hot freeze. They all looked at her, even Mr. Harrow, with a strange flash in his eyes. Shiana turned away first, and then her mum, who said, "It's just fun and games, not the place of some random bystander to butt in by stealing a dog." "Forcing someone to eat dog feces?" Riddle asked. "Is that fun and games?" Mr. Harrow let his breath out sharply. "She likes it," Shiana piped up, and Phoebe felt a kick to her shin under the table. "Isn't that right, Ginge? We have pictures and everything. It's how she gets followers and comments. Told you she was special needs." "None of this excuses what he did to Shiana and her puppy," Mrs. Harrow snapped. "Yeah, and didn't you say he was a pedo? Maybe that's why he was listening in." Megan nudged Shiana's shoulder. Mr. Harrow's breath tore back in. "He made inappropriate comments to you?" Mrs. Harrow's voice sounded eager. Shiana's face scrunched in confusion. "I remember something. It happens so much." "She calls people pedos all the time," Phoebe said. The Fairfords man was probably as likely to pedo Shiana as Phoebe had been to pedo the dog. "I can't help it. Men are always looking at me." Shiana tugged at her tight t-shirt to loosen it and ducked her head. "You don't know what it's like to look this way." "And we're listening," Riddle said, "but it would help if you could answer your mother's question about inappropriate comments from this specific gentleman." "It was more the way he just randomly talked to us," Shiana whimpered. "One time in front of the chippy, some old guy asked Shiana to take her shirt off, only he used worse words than that. We were just walking by." Megan told the story like it was an amazing celebrity encounter, like meeting Ed Sheeran or something. "I know how that is, believe me," Mrs. Harrow shook her head. "I can only imagine how upsetting your experience outside the chippy was," said Inspector Riddle. "But can we bring the focus back to Mr. Swenson for the moment? He told me he greeted you as customers, and then you called him a paedophile and ran off, to use his words." "Who cares?" snarled Mrs. Harrow. "Why are you pitting the words of someone guilty of criminal mischief against what a little girl says?" Shiana slumped back from the table, drawing her knees onto her chair. "Yeah, I could tell right away what he wanted." Mr. Harrow lowered his hands to speak. They were trembling, and his voice was rusty. He was scared, not angry. "Sweetheart, is it possible that maybe your earlier experiences influenced how you saw the man at the shop? Do you think—" "Don't you dare." His wife's voice made Phoebe jump. "Your daughter needs your support after all she's been through. How dare you question her?" "I don't want her to think all men are like the one outside the chippy. Isn't that supportive?" Shiana pouted. "You don't believe me, Daddy?" "Of course, I believe you feel now that he was a threat. I'm merely asking—" "We don't need men to validate our feelings," Shiana's mum broke in. "Especially men like you. What would you know about how men's poorly controlled impulses affect us?" He cringed. "But I know this man. I met him before the video appeared." He gestured at Phoebe and she shrank back. Being recognized for sharing the clip was as bad as being revealed as a poo-eating ginger. His wife's at the nursing home, paralyzed by a stroke, and he's incredibly caring." Phoebe noticed the inspector take out his notebook. Mrs. Harrow's eyes were barely glowing slits in her tan face. "Oh, you know him from the nursing home, where all the nice people are, like your psycho father and your little—" "That proves it, though." Shiana shot up straight in her chair. "He's not getting any from his wife, so he goes after girls like me." "You can't make that assumption about every man. Shiana, I promise you there's more to us than—" "More to you!" Mrs. Harrow shrieked. Phoebe could have throttled her, not only because of the noise, but because she wanted to hear what he meant by more. What did men want? "More to you? Shut up, Paul. You lost your right to speak after that pathetic stunt you pulled." "What?" Shiana bit back a grin. "What did he do?" "Mr. and Mrs. Harrow," Riddle began, his pen twitching. "I did not lose my rights." Mr. Harrow stood up. He cast an impressive shadow over Phoebe. I'm still Shiana's father, and we can't keep ignoring how she bullies other children. She cares more about getting social media likes than about the well-being of her pet. And like you, she's addicted to being found attractive, whatever the cost. I'm not addicted. I wasn't the one who was unfaithful. Phoebe glanced at Shiana. The angelic face looked gobsmacked, horrified, even humiliated, her jaw loose, her eyes goggling. For a second, it was all worth it. Mrs. Harrow was still screaming, punctuating her words with muscled little fists. I will kick you out of this house and you'll have nothing, not even your stupid job. And that's what you want for this man too? Shiana's dad pleaded. He's already been fired. Listen, I am truly sorry that I betrayed you. I'm sorry I met someone kind and warm and I let myself fall in love. I'm doing everything you ask, trying to make up for it, but I can't let you take it out on a man with so little left. But Daddy... Shiana's face crumpled with real tears, not manipulative ones. Now see what you've done, hissed her mother, putting her arm around Shiana while Megan inched back, wide-eyed. I'm sorry, please. Mr. and Mrs. Harrow, settle down. The policeman spoke again more forcefully. Let me outline the situation. First, it's true that Mr. Swenson did a terrible thing. I assure you he feels deep remorse and he's suffered the loss of his job and a great deal of abuse for it. He refrained from speaking about your daughter's questionable manners because he didn't wish the same type of fury to be unleashed on her. Oh, how big of him, Mrs. Harrow grumbled. What kind of... I haven't finished. Riddle silenced her, his voice swelling briefly. If you wish to press charges, if you want even stricter penalties for a man who acts as full-time carer, his wife may sometimes go to a nursing home for respite, but it is highly infrequent. Charlie Swenson never sleeps through a night because he has to administer care at 2 and 5 a.m., Phoebe's palms twinged, and she realized she'd been digging her fingernails into them. She'd known he was a nice man. She knew it. If you want to go on with charges of criminal mischief, he will testify about his motives, which will open questions about Shiana's record of bullying. I don't bully her, Shiana sniffled. She likes what we do, or else she wouldn't come back. Can't bloody get rid of her, her mother agreed with that unfunny laugh again. I've gathered from school officials that several students have complained about you insulting them, Riddle stated, to Shiana's face, and Phoebe was in heaven. Shiana opened and closed her glossy pink mouth and whimpered again. Are you saying my child deserved to have her dog taken, forcibly taken? Riddle faced Mrs. Harrow with complete calm. I just want you to be aware of what you risk in the court of public opinion, so to speak. Mr. Swenson already understands that. The window to his bedroom was cracked last night, with his seriously ill wife inside. Well, that's him, isn't it? Don't lecture me on public opinion. I've seen the comments against him on the Citizen's website. Nothing Shiana does compares to what he did. Perhaps. But people who are aware of Mr. Swenson's situation, which he tends to downplay because it's painful, find him very sympathetic. That's worth considering. Riddle surveyed them all. Now, I'm sorry to impose further on your hospitality, Mrs. Harrow, but I need to speak with Phoebe as the sole witness to the incident. And Mr. Harrow, perhaps you could join us, since you say you're acquainted with Mr. Swenson? Phoebe followed the two men across the hallway to the lounge. Riddle walked in a commanding manner while Mr. Harrow loped despairingly. Phoebe's legs felt stiff, almost turned to stone by the eyes at her back. She dropped into the settee and bounced slightly, as it was much firmer than their one at home. Mr. Harrow pushed the door closed and sat on the edge of an armchair, while the policeman took the other end of the couch. Miss Taylor, Riddle's voice was quiet now, what did you see the day you took that video? Quaking in her hoodie, she wet her lips. I can't. But this was what she came for. He was nice. He stroked the dog, really slowly, so she wouldn't be scared. He talked to her, and I heard him say, hurry. He wanted her to be free, but she wouldn't go, so he made her. She looked down at her hands buried in her pockets, making faint lumps in her lap. I wish he'd got away, and I hadn't, What made you decide to reveal the video? They wouldn't leave me alone. Who? What did they do? Sweat returned, oozing down her back and sliding through her fists. Her. Phoebe twitched her head toward the other room. She kept saying I stole the dog, and she got everyone against me, and then she said I pedoed the dog, and they said they'd kill me and do all kinds of things, and, now they've stopped. She almost forgot, but I reminded her, and she made them stop. The inspector nodded, his pen hurrying over the paper. Mr. Harrow looked stunned. Phoebe admitted, I tried other ways to stop her, but it didn't work. Sorry. Do you want Mr. Swenson to face charges? Phoebe shook her head so hard she allowed her hood to slip. Mr. Harrow. Riddle angled himself around. As far as I know, Charlie Swenson has never opted for respite. He keeps Harriet by his side every minute he can. So where and when did you actually meet? Shiana's dad shook his head. I knew of him for a long time. What a good man he was. And then the day before, and he fell onto himself, diving his face into his hands, huddling down, sobbing. It was as scary as the men with stones the other night, sickening as those awful comments Phoebe's classmates messaged her. I knew him because of Lydia, the man wept. Lydia, my... I see, Riddle murmured. You're in a very difficult situation indeed. There's no chance when Charlie had his altercation with your daughter that he was aware of the connection? Mr. Harrow wiped his eyes with a hanky from his pocket. That his daughter was having an affair with a married man? No, he didn't know. Realization hit Phoebe like a punch in the gut. She thought she'd be sick with guilt but also fear, terror that the one new person she'd found who seemed to like her should actually hate her. Oh my God, Phoebe muttered, her hand over her mouth. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. The video, the picture. What picture? Riddle asked. Phoebe kept looking at Mr. Harrow, willing him to figure it out so she didn't have to come out and say it, but he just looked dazed. The picture, you know, from the park? I brought it here. He blinked, winced, opened and closed his mouth like Shiana had done. That was you too? But why? Because you were supposed to choose her. It came out in a wail. That woman in there, Phoebe waved toward the door to shut to Mrs. Harrow. She'd go mad, and you'd tell her off and make her and Shiana go, so the person you were happy with could come here, and Shiana would be taken down, and everyone would know it, and she'd leave me alone. I couldn't leave my little girl. Dear God, I'm a lot of things, but I wouldn't. I'm trying to be better. I've got to be better. He spoke slowly as if waking up. I work with struggling students at the Catholic college. I'd probably lose my job if I left my wife. That income is the only reason she hasn't kicked me out. I thought about it. He ran his fingers through his hair, his face darkening. Cruel or not, when it came down to it, I wanted to forsake everything for Lydia. But the next day there was that video, and I realized, if I built a new life with the woman I love... He swallowed hard. Lydia. Deb would see, wouldn't she, who Lydia's father is. She'd murder them both. He sighed. The real issue is I've been a completely inadequate father and husband, and I have to fix that. I have to find a way to warm them, make them secure enough to be likable. It's the only way, isn't it? Riddle scratched his neck. For the whole thing with the dog to blow over? Probably. Where is the dog at the moment, by the way? Mr. Harrow grimaced. Outside, whining the neighbourhood down. I see. Riddle tapped his notebook. It probably held more useful discoveries than what Phoebe put in her sketchbook. If I take the video back, she said, because it is mine, can't it all go away? I'm sorry, Phoebe, it doesn't work like that. Phoebe's eyes burned. It's so unfair. I didn't mean to mess everything up. They already were messed up. Riddle shut his notebook. You came along and made everyone see it. That's my job a lot of the time, and believe me, I know it's hard. But there's always someone who needs it. I videoed some racist guys throwing stones at people Wednesday night. Phoebe nibbled her thumb. Is it too late to share it and help someone, or too soon and it would just ruin someone else's life? Riddle raised his eyebrows. Neither. If you show it to our officers, we can deal with it in the proper channels. A telly popped into Phoebe's mind, a telly showing the same scene played out differently from one channel to another. Phoebe turned up at Shiana's door and handed over the video. No, on the next channel, Phoebe walked in and gave Shiana a black eye. And on this channel, could this be the proper one, please? Phoebe found Lydia on the way to Shiana's, and they teamed up to kick Shiana and her mum out. Lydia would take Mrs. Harrow's place, and Phoebe would take Shiana's. Do you think you hold that much sway with them? Riddle was asking Mr. Harrow. No, but I'll try and get it. If I help Shiana find ways to get attention that don't involve cruelty to others. Good luck with that, Phoebe grumbled. She couldn't help it. Shiana's dad met her eyes. I'm so sorry, Phoebe. I haven't taught my daughter well, and I haven't acted on my misgivings. I'm sorry you suffered for it. Why do you keep coming back? Another blush prickled Phoebe's cheeks. I hate being home on my own. I don't know what's going to happen and the sounds get louder and I can't stand it." "You've had an awful time, haven't you?" Mr. Harrow murmured. Phoebe shrugged and her hood fell right back. Didn't matter, they all knew she was Ginger here. "I won't help them hurt Lydia's dad. I don't know what I'll do instead, but not that. We're on the same side, you and I, but I probably won't see much of you now." Mr. Harrow seemed truly sad about it. "I hope for your sake you find a better place than here to pass your time." "How about keeping me company for my next stop?" Riddle offered Phoebe, his eyes sparkling. "See what the town looks like from my car. I reckon I could do with an extra pair of eyes like yours." She fidgeted. "Would it be loud?" Phoebe hated sirens. They were like Chinese burns for the eardrums. "We don't need sirens where we're going. It's only a call to old friends of mine who'd be very interested to meet you. You see, just between us, I've known the Swensons for many years." Phoebe hung back. Why would they want to meet me? Charlie loves entertaining people. He's a very good cook, you know. The inspector pulled the door open. "Besides, you're quite an interesting young lady." Craning her neck, Phoebe saw the dining room was empty. Maybe Shiana and her mum were crying in their rooms, or waiting with a kitchen knife around the corner. She'd better stick with the police officer. Riddle turned to look back at Mr. Harrow. "Will you be all right?" He gestured helplessly, the stirring of a hand against an overpowering tsunami. He'd obviously give anything to ride along in the police car to the Swensons' house. Almost anything. Phoebe wanted to tell him to stay strong, or something like that, but that would be pointless. Instead, she mirrored the drowning hand motion back at him and followed the inspector without saying goodbye. That's the end of chapter 24. There's just 4 more chapters after that.